We're going to be a small group today, and just like this, over coffee. No special topic. Maybe you propose a topic. I just wanted to see you this week as well, not to miss out, because I'm still in Bulgaria and it's a little more difficult here to afterwards to process the videos, publish them and things like that. My computer is extremely slow here. But let's still meet, I thought. Why not?
Yes, we can always make it a little shorter.
Yes, I was going to suggest that. Definitely not going to keep you for 3 hours today. So just wanted to say hello, see what everybody's up to. Any ideas, suggestions? I don't know, anything that you want to share. You are the regulars. And Chloe, are you with us for the first time?
For the first time, I saw your post on Astrological Buzz on Facebook.
Okay.
Yes, so I was interested in like learning from you guys because I've only, I guess I would say I've only started taking astrology as a study. So before it was only like interest. So now I've been really like trying to dive deep into it. So, I always want to learn more.
So you're at the right place. Definitely.
Can I suggest that Radilina has done unbelievable weekly teachings from her, from other people in the group, and you could learn so much from just listening to each class. I mean, not class, but they've had focuses. This is discussion, but you can learn so much just going through her site, Six Seed.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you for suggesting. I'm going to share now for Chloe to see where everything is. Expecting a couple more people. Hope maybe it will be just us, but a few more signed up. So yes, Chloe, there is regularly something we do as a topic here. Usually on Thursdays we meet like this at the same time always. So you're welcome to join again. Maybe the next one will be in 2 weeks because at the moment I'm in an unusual period of not doing that much. But in the last year we did almost weekly. And there are many topics on my YouTube channel. You can watch the recordings if you want.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'm very interested in that.
I hope you find them interesting. And
thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, well, so Dwayne, what have you been up to?
It's been a very nice balance of being spending time at the computer, doing research and still working on presentations for the future with our group here, but also getting out into the hills and really enjoying this magnificent spring that's coming on. We've had a really great stretch of fantastic weather, and as I see on Lauren's page, very similar. The place is just exploding with flowers, and I go up into the hills to get a traditional medicine called bitterroot. So I have to go looking for little signs of this plant and dig them up, and then they have a long root. They're kind of like a ginseng root, and they have to be peeled before you eat them. And so it's quite a process, but it's become an annual pilgrimage for me to do that, and I just love it. I take my motorcycle, and the signature bird sound is the hearing the meadowlarks in the background as I'm searching out.
Meadowlarks, such a lovely call.
Oh, isn't it? And it just
we have them here.
Serves my soul.
I miss meadowlarks and robins.
Yeah.
So used to those. Where I grew up in eastern South Dakota, we had them all the time, but here in LA area in Southern California, you don't really see them west of the Rockies. So it's always interesting to think about things like that. It's like, what didn't make it across the Rockies?
I have robins who live here, who have a nest here, give birth here at my house. And they have a pond and a waterfall, I should say artificial pond, a man-made. And Oh my God, the birds just love to bathe in it and then stand on the table nearby and shake off and fluff up. And it is, I think I have found a lot of stress in the world lately. I haven't, although I haven't gone through the fear many people have. I don't know. I sometimes think, why are you not more afraid? But I have felt the world kind of coming to a stress point lately, and nature has been the way to, and music, the way to relieve it. It's just I go and I unify the meditation, but it feels like the world's be intensifying. The screws are on or something. It's tightening the screw sometimes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Well, when looking at the chart for today, I noticed that very soon, in the next year maybe, Jupiter will be with Neptune in Pisces. You know, the two Piscean planets together in Pisces. And that's not something I'm very much looking forward to. I don't know what you guys will say, but I think it may have to do with what you're talking about, Lauren. Even though Pisces is more like associated with relaxing than with stressing out, but I think something is kind of building up and it's heavy in the
Well,
air.
it can be a feeling of being lost and not,
Exactly.
and like the anchor can be gone.
Yeah, that's right. Almost like we're floating and we're not sure in what direction we're going. And
And the other thing I've really noticed in the world in many different ways is that polarities are strengthening.
mm,
Uh, different people are taking very strong sides that don't agree with each other in every sorts of character. First it's like divided up this way, and then it's like divided up that way, and then another division comes and there's another division, and it's just seems like a time of great separations happening in the
mhm.
midst of trying to unify oneself.
That's right. This is one of the most stressful things at the moment, that we are getting into conflict with people close to us without even wanting to. And we've been talking here in the group before that it's probably the best idea to try to find balance, to not go to any extremes, to try to listen to astrological wisdom as well, and seeing that every side of the story is very subjective, also because of the energies we're all made of in different proportions. But you're right, it's getting worse and worse, I think. And I thought I could isolate myself from the whole madness, and how wrong I was. I don't know about you guys, but after 1 year, I feel like this thing cannot be cheated. You know, you can't just be an observant, being on the, you know, observing everything from a distance and not participating. Sooner or later, I was very pleased for a while. For the first 6 months or 7 months, it was all very quiet with me in Valencia, and I wasn't into any arguments with anybody. I didn't want to, you know, kind of impose my opinion on anyone or the other way around. So I thought it was going to be a good, productive working time where we can do our talks, we can do our meetings and read and so on. But eventually, it hit me very close. You know, one of the closest people to me was like on the opposite side of things in a way, but I was worried. I mean, and things like that. So, yeah,
Yes,
it's
I've
always
had it here
people.
in my actual neighborhood, the people I walk with. And what I have liked is even the like 2 or 3 people who are my walking partners. Um, we're choosing different actions based
Mhm.
very strongly on ourselves. And if people at first try to persuade me, or why, and I just don't even argue. It's a private process. I
Yes.
want to make decisions from deep within myself, what feels right. But I have liked that not everyone is shunning. Not everybody is completely polarizing, but they're willing to put aside the difference in that category, whatever that category is, and just stay with let's still do the things we love to do, like walk.
Yes, of course. Yes. I don't know what you think, guys, but I feel like there is so much positive Plutonian effects as well, and there will be more and more. I mean, that everything is eventually coming up to the surface. Every person's reaction or lack of reaction, or whatever it is, we are forced in a way to expose ourselves, and it's very difficult and not what we want eventually. But I
I
feel
like,
like it's gonna be for good at the end of
yeah,
it.
I like to retreat and I like to keep very private and I don't like to
Yeah.
argue. I don't like to rebel publicly. I just like to rebel privately.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
I mean, or have my, and I'm not doing it for the idea of rebellion. I'm doing it because I'm a person that believes in what I believe. I've had my experiences that support what I'm doing. I always think I could be wrong, but I try my best to align with my own inner self.
Yeah. Sounds like a good advice for all of us.
Mm.
At
I
least
wonder if there's
will.
a correlation between the way people are polarizing more and the fact that our magnetic poles are moving more than normal. It's almost like they're getting ready to flop or something, which they do periodically.
Tell us more about this, James.
Are you speaking about the 26,000 years and the polar shifts?
No, I'm talking about the 6 to 750,000 year history of the Earth's magnetic poles actually switching,
Okay.
where the North Pole is the South and the South Pole becomes the North magnetic poles. Because in the last 30 years, they've actually moved a lot more than they normally do. They're moving more and they're moving faster. And as a result, they've had to make adjustments in, all of the GPS equipment and the like that. It relies on the magnetic poles for direction and location.
True. They say that the north and all that of a compass, it changes. It's changing
Yes.
and they've also said time is changing, and they've had to adjust the universal type of clocks.
Yeah.
I mean, this all must be just perfect, and I think, of course, it could be in our astrology. One thing I liked about an astrological post I saw this week was about the Sagittarius and the Gemini. Just the idea that Sagittarius is the answer and Gemini are the questions, and we're going towards our questions.
Mhm.
And I also thought Sat is truth and one, and in Gemini, and the Gemini are like the like J.J. Hurtak wrote a book called The Keys of Enoch, and in that book, the first sentence is, we all live in a one and many universe, and so it's like just the one and the many. I thought the answer the questions, and that we're going towards many individualized truths instead of this holy one, it must be this way truth. But that this truth is, we have to hold the polarity of many truths right now and ask questions and not be so dogmatic.
Yes, we have to overcome the dark side of Sagittarius, as we spoke on this. Remember when we spoke about the current nodes
Yes.
and how
Dark side of Sagittarius? Sagittarius has a dark side?
Oh yes. The
Well.
most cheerful energy also has a dark side. What do you think it is?
I think
Is it not obvious?
dark side of Sagittarius energy.
It's called fundamentalism.
There could be a dark sense of humor. The dark humor. And I suppose since Sagittarius also represents in ways the higher education, it can be that the more you learn, the more close-minded you become. The more you think you know.
arrogance towards that I'm
Yes.
the truth. And
I
the
find it
only
interesting, Lauren, what you said about the question and the answer, because with the North Node in the Gemini, it's like, here's the question, or we're looking at questions for the future. And with the answers coming from Sagittarius, with the South Node, it's basically telling us, look, you already know the answers. Why are you asking these stupid questions? Because you know the answer. It hasn't changed.
Oh, is it not the other way around? Maybe just a
When the nodes switch, when the South Node is in Gemini, the questions come from the past and we look to the future for answers.
So speak it, take that sentence and reform it in the other way, like you were saying, or is it
No.
not the other way?
The way James said it, it sounded to me like Sagittarius is the solution to the question. Let's say the solution. Well, the solution should be Gemini in this particular case, and I'm personally a lot more Sagittarian than Gemini. And
The answer is always going to be in Virgo.
Sorry, James, I didn't hear that.
So, Chloe, is there any particular area of astrology that's fascinating you or interesting you more than others?
Right now I've been okay, so I guess just a little bit more background on me. I've been studying, I graduated with a degree in psychology, and then throughout while I was studying psychology in university, one of them is always going to be discussed, which is Carl Jung, and he's, eventually I found out that he's sort of taken as one of the fathers of modern psychology, modern astrology. Sorry, so that was around the time where those things sort of like came together for me. So it's been very interesting. Like when I got to know for first of all like my natal chart and all of those things, I felt like things clicked into place for me. And at the same time, that's when I sort of got into spirituality and all of that. Um, so to me, I'd like, right now, what's most interesting to me is sort of like the practical aspects of which, where astrology like sort of happens in my life, in my surroundings. Because one of the things I've been most interested in is really studying and understanding the universal laws. Um, so I've been trying to, it's very interesting because you mentioned like sort of things about polarity and like the Gemini Sagittarius axis and all of that. Because for me, I've been sort of like balancing those things, those I guess quote unquote higher questions, and I guess if you believe in coincidences, just a while ago, I was thinking about like religion and how I don't necessarily ascribe myself to a specific religion, but I really find it interesting understanding and learning about all these different beliefs. So it's sort of that difference between religion and spirituality. So I'm sorry, this is a bit like scattered, but it's been, I don't know, it's been seeing strategy come into play in my life, and not only like seeing how it is in the present but also like going back into the past experiences that I've had and realizing that, oh, there was something that happened in my astrology that sort of influenced or whichever it was at that time in my life. So right now that's been my focus.
Thank you. I For me, I was able to. I'm a Virgo sun, but I just had a nodal return recently, so I've got the North Node in Gemini and South Node in Sagittarius. And my nodes align with my descendant axis, but for me, I had to kind of like rationalize, intellectualize, analyze, and include how everything works for myself. And one of the things that really helped to cement the relationship for me was the fact that where quantum physics, quantum mechanics is going, and basically where the science is actually going seems to be supporting, you know, all the woo-woo stuff that people were talking about for decades. Because if you take the human body and break it down, ultimately it breaks down into a collection of elements, and the realization that all of those elements were created in the birth, life, and death of stars. One then comes to the only conclusion is that we are actually star children. We're made up of stardust, and we're all made up of the same stardust that came from probably the same or collection of stars. So, you know, to that extent, we are totally connected, whether we
and I
like
would
it or not.
also and I also would like to agree because you mentioned a while ago about you know, the polarities and sort of Jupiter going into Pisces. And it's been really interesting as well that you mentioned like more of the woo-woo stuff, because at least in my circles or in the spheres that I frequent, at least I noticed that a lot more people are getting into spirituality or the woo-woo stuff. And you know, tarot has been becoming a lot more popular, which a lot of people, or at least my understanding is, I would associate that with like Neptunian or Piscean energy in general. So that's been really interesting to observe as well.
It is interesting. This is the first time since 1855, 56 that both Jupiter and Neptune have been in Pisces. It's been a long time since they were both there.
Yes.
What happened in 1855?
Well, let's see. That was when, that's when, what was it? I think that's when Jupiter and Neptune left Pisces. So up to that, because Neptune was discovered in Pisces, if I remember correctly. Wasn't it? Or was it? Let's see, 1847.
1846.
Yeah, no, not, yeah. It was, what you had was basically the build up to the American Civil War. There was onset of spiritualism movement within the United States.
Well, I think what I was even saying is that the synchronicity, by asking that question, I
Mhm.
had something in mind, which was that it was the build up to the Civil War and to a great time of polarities.
Yes,
So when Neptune
yes,
was
quite so.
discovered, was it in Pisces?
That I don't know.
So okay, we can check, but it seems like around the time it was discovered, it was one full cycle of its course away from where it is today, approximately.
Yes, yeah. There was recently Neptune had a return to its discovery point.
So what degree are we talking about in Pisces right now?
Right
Now
now,
it's
or okay, let's share with you the chart of the day, which I have here. Neptune is on the 23rd at the moment, 23rd degree of Pisces.
Okay, September 23rd, 1846.
September 23rd. Okay, let's do that.
It was at
Oh yeah, my Mercury is at 22 degrees is the Sabian symbol for my Mercury, and it's in my first house. So that's really been strong, I think.
No, Neptune was in Aries when it was discovered, right? That's what it's coming up.
yeah.
I'm not sure if you see this one. Let me
There we
reshare.
go. What's interesting is that apparently, if that date is using that date, Neptune was at 25 Aquarius, conjunct Saturn at 25 Aquarius.
Let's see. Yes. So an exact conjunction between Neptune and yes, sorry. I thought that was Neptune, but that was actually Uranus in Aries.
Yeah, you had Pluto at 25 Aries and Mars at 25 Virgo. Interesting, 4 planets at 25.
This conjunction of Neptune and Saturn is very interesting because these are exactly the two planets that are related to social structure changes, let's say, and mass
Yeah,
level movements, like, for example, the advent of communism or any sort of structural social movement like that is usually followed. These cycles are the ones that we
oh, there we are.
follow.
Okay.
Yes, James. What was it?
I've got, it's going to be kind of a busy morning for me because there's like, my wife's got a Zoom coming up that I got to help her with, and then I've got another Zoom coming up myself. So I'll be in and out for a little bit here.
Okay, as you want. Take your time.
I'm staying in. I'm just going to be off camera.
All right.
So it's nothing anybody said.
We're not gonna take it personally. Don't worry.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Figure out
going
how to
back
do this.
to this idea of, this of the questions and the answers, one thing I came up with in my own mind is that if you have all the questions, it's also it's like Gemini gives lots of options and a lot of variety. And I look at that as this tendency, the importance of individualizing oneself, the individualization of beings, and yet they become whole individualized. So eventually the individualization then unifies with the whole, and then rebalances and knows that truth of the oneness of everything. But in order to get there, you have to individualize and live your own unique stream and let yourself be the center guide if you can access your most inner guidance.
Mhm.
And anyway, that had to do with me examining this week about the Gemini questions, and the Sagittarius truth. It was Emilian Dobrev, who is also born in Bulgaria, who brought that idea forward. He went into retreat for a few months and then came out.
Yes, I was wondering where he was for a while, and good he's back.
Yes, he just came back with his explanation that he needed to adjust himself.
Yes, we all need a bit of retreat.
The long composition he wrote.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah. So but anyway, he is still very inspired. I really appreciated when he came to this class and brought himself here as well.
We hope he's back at some point.
We'll see.
We'll see. I'll invite him again in case he forgot about us, but I'm sure he didn't. He's just.
Well, go ahead and invite him again. And Stephen, this is your morning where you have time.
Oh, for myself, yes, yes. That's why it's comfortably
Did
casual
you
today.
prepare anything to share with us on a day like
I
today?
haven't invited Stephen today officially.
Okay.
But Stephen, feel free to share anything you want to share. It's just I wanted to also dedicate another slot whenever you want. A little later when I'm back to Valencia, hopefully, or
Good.
in London.
Good. But anyway, hello, Stephen. Hello, Dwayne. Hello, Chloe. Hello, Radilina.
Lauren, you seem to be enjoying our company today.
I always do. I feel very like I fit in the oddness of this group of people.
You certainly do. So, Stephen, what's up with you? Tell us.
Okay. Well, as Dwayne was pointing out, personal research is part of my activity as a focus, and I'll acknowledge it's age related, meaning that the older that I become, the more I'm interested in the research because I have the time to do it. And I don't have to have the distractions of being tied to a 40-hour-a-week a routine, which has its own fatigue factor. So the point about it then is comes down to the idea of utilizing astrology as a tool, again following the premise of this particular group of the Rudhyar direction, Sagittarian, in terms of humanistic astrology as an evolution of an art with, let's say, scientific principles behind its understanding, rather than looking at scientific proof. Because then we go back to what Lauren was pointing out about the polarity of people's consciousness, that will prove it to me, but I don't accept the premises, so it can't be proved. And then the individual participating in an astrological understanding says, well, I guess I only need to prove it to myself, which goes back to the idea of the individual saying, well, I disengaged from an individual who isn't even open to the thought, which is the common thing of like having an open mind, which gets back to the Sagittarian principle. So being a Gemini kind of a guy, you know, I kind of have some personal affiliations with the theme, and I try to avoid the glamorization of over-identifying with one particular aspect. But there was a point that that you had brought up about the Sagittarian element, the lower element of Sagittarius, the negative shadow of Sagittarius. And James seemed to be a little taken back and says, well, isn't it just, you know, perpetual optimism, you know, Jupiter, joyous, jubilant. But when we look at the symbolism of the glyph of Sagittarius, it's an arrow, but it's crossed right there. So, and when we look at the image of Sagittarius, it's the centaur. So you got this idea of the humanization of intellect, which would be the Gemini point of, let's say, the refinement of thought, but you got this base animal thing. So the idea is that if the conscious can't get past that little bar, it invaginates back down to the lower basal animal form. And we think of stampeding horses and a person being stomped under the hoofs. There's a brutality about Sagittarius, and actually a meanness of spirit. And because there's this elevation of communication skills, the Sagittarian can be quite like a rapier's cut of the blade, eviscerated an individual in a kind of almost a psychic attack that can be quite spiritually destroying for an individual, just in terms of just stomping someone to death. And in that particular regard, that's that directionality implied with Sagittarius on a baser level, then goes to the idea of manifestation of evil, which is supposed to have been factored out moving from Libra to Scorpio, because you're going to have a polarity between Scorpio and Taurus. But the idea of the animal form is looking at Capricorn, because Sagittarius is supposed to be preparing from the Libra cardinal cross to the Capricorn cardinal cross. Is when you look at the glyph of Capricorn, it's also a dual animal. It's the goat fish. So you got, you know, the goat on the head and bottom, but in going back into the mythology of Capricorn, the fish is really a crocodile. And so the upper ascent of Capricorn ends up being the unicorn. So now the upper ascent of Capricorn is really the refinement of the Sagittarian horse. So now we have the idea of the unicorn is always considered a very special spiritual animal, because it's got that one pointedness, this arrow thing that is more conceptual, but in Capricorn, it becomes a sense of manifestation.
Interesting.
Now, I don't know how many of you people follow the work of Philip Lindsay. Do any of you know Philip Lindsay?
No?
Never heard of him. Her or Philip? Yeah, him.
You do? You know him?
No, not familiar.
Okay, well, he's an esoteric astrologer. He's published many books, and he has a very special website. And every month he has an pertaining to the ingress of the sign. And since we're moving into Gemini, this month was the Gemini 221, or 2021. And what I'll do, it's a very long essay. I'll put the link here. For everyone's kind of opportunity to read and review. And getting back to the idea of how history moves within the cycles itself. So again, getting back to this idea of this polarity shift, or at least identifying of these polarity movements is kind of working with the first three signs: Aries, Taurus, and Gemini. And Aries, Taurus, and Gemini end up being fractionally redistributed in each of the triplicities of going through the quadrant itself. But one of the things I would like to get back to, Radilina, I was looking forward to having the Chiron presentation recorded, but it's not on file yet.
Well, I have been having a bit of trouble with the processing of it, because it's just, yeah, it's not that easy where I am here at the moment. I have been able to do it, but not very good quality. So I need to basically go back home in order to post the proper footing of it. So yeah, but if you want, I can send it to you.
No, that's okay. For it, but the point I wanted to bring up was you made a very interesting comparison between the Chiron being a transition from the Saturn to the Uranian quality, from the inner to the outer planets. Now, the thing about that, for Chiron to have been, let's say, discovered in 77, and the idea of looking at let's say collective consciousness in terms of, let's say, open collective exoterically from 77, moving on into this how scientific endeavors were being developed, and also the extension of, let's say, consciousness practice of individuals, going back to Rudhyar in his own presentation of this growth of humanistic psychology, is that one of the things that has been brought up in many of these group meetings is in reference to either transits or progressions or the natal, within the natal chart itself. And a lot of times I've heard the phrase being used: activating the aspect, activating the transit. Does that sound very familiar with people? So
Maybe.
it leads to me then to say, well, what's the underlying mechanism of activating a connection between within an astrological chart? And part of this activation is the idea of a person mentally engaging in making this connective link. Now, in following, let's say, the principles of meditation, there's this principle called the Antakarana. Anyone familiar with the Antakarana? Hey, very good. So the idea here is the Antakarana represents a thread of consciousness rather than a life thread, because the idea and the Antakarana is a composite. And in terms of this Antakarana, the individual develops the Antakarana to make this ascension from the lower to the higher self. So in that particular regard, the function of Chiron in a person's chart also reflects the antichironic connection that the individual focuses their life on. And so getting back to the idea of how do we as individuals activate our own astrological chart, is through a process of a mental engagement. So now we're working from the thought of taking the same principle of what we're talking about today, this Gemini to Sagittarius thing. So how do I activate my sense of thought to go from the lower plane to the higher plane and say, well, I want to cross that bar, that Sagittarian bar, the ring past not, as it would be referred to in the in the literature. But here's what I would like to share: this idea of activating the Antakarana as far as the thread of consciousness in an individual's life. Now, there are two words that I come across quite frequently that are used truistically, but a lot of people really don't have an operational definition of them. And the first word is relax. The person says, well, just try relaxing. I want you to do some relaxing exercises. Try to be relaxed. But however, it begs the question because the word relax doesn't tell how a person's supposed to relax. It's an end state. Similar to the word yoga. Yoga really means it's an end state. Well, I'm going to do yoga. What kind of yoga? Well, yoga is yoga. Well, no. It's an end state. It doesn't say what the process of the yogic is. And the other word is meditation. Well, let's meditate. Oh, we're going to meditate. Well, we'll get in a meditative posture. We'll get into a meditative pause, but it doesn't explain how a person does it. Now, here's the point I would like to share. In this antakarana idea of establishing a sense of a thread conscious from the sense of a lower, more primal sense of self to a sense of ascendancy sense of self, has to do with controlling the breath. And from the Eastern traditions, this is related to pranayama, because when people do the yogi thing, they say, oh, we want to do our breathing, we want to do our breathing. But very few people are aware that the breathing process has to be 4 cycle. And in this particular regard, there's this, it has to be a slow inhale, and then there's a pause, a deliberate pause. And then there's a longer exhale. And then there's a deliberate pause. And these pauses in the breath has to do with establishing an intentionality of the mind and a focus of being able to control the body. Not that I'm going to hold my breath till I turn purple, but the idea that I'm controlling my own body. And this generalizes then to the autonomic nervous system about activating the vagus nerve. And by activating the vagus nerve, by doing, and this 4 cycle breathing in the literature is referred to as kumbhaka. I mean, it's got a long history about it, but this is how what the meditative process is about, being able to control the breathing. But the idea of once you control this breathing in terms of a focus is the idea now that individual is involved with the process of inspiration is related to invocation. Expiration is related to evocation. So now I'm involving myself with an ebb of flow of my own breath within a principle of cosmic expansionness. And from the Vedantic principles, the idea of these cycles of being and becoming, universal principles, would be considered the pralaya, which I'm holding the breath, exhale, and the manvantara, the expansion of a new universe. Well, the idea now is, well, okay, we have these universes come and go, and then we have these constellations, and here we are in a constellation and and we're not in a universe, we exist in a galaxy. So 100 years ago, the universe was identified as just the Milky Way. And when they say, well, what about that Andromeda thing? He says, well, and Andromeda's kind of hooked on one of the arms, and Andromeda is really part of the Milky Way. Until Hubble, the guy who named the telescope, saw this red shift thing and says, well, no, man, there's a depth of field you guys aren't getting. Those stars you're seeing way far away, they're out of our galaxy. And this universal thing is really quite expansive. The point I would like to share about this is relating to our astrology itself. From an anthropological point of view, all cultures around the world could see the sun, the moon, and the stars. And all the cultures around the world, from a cultural anthropological point of view, developed creation. And now you can do a simple Wikipedia lookup about the types of creation myths, and creation myths fall in different categories. Now, depending upon what affinity a person has for a creation myth, this is going to define a person with a polarity between a contrast between other cultures' creation myths. So there is an intrinsic sense of conflict, but the underlying principle has to do with how a person relates to that principle. And the point I would like to share is without the names of the planets, astrology falls flat. And what do I mean by that? Because we say, well, our tradition. Well, the planets had names, and we'll just accept those names, and then we'll establish kind of a pantheon around this thing, and we'll project the dynamics of these gods in as the planets, and those that will reflect within ourselves. But the point I would like to share is that this becomes a script, a mythological script. So an individual, by having their chart, allows themselves to engage into a personal mythology, which was what Lauren was talking about, of the individuation process. Without the names, the establishing an identification with the planets is very difficult, if not almost impossible. And what I would like to share, so how many of you are aware of the measure, what's referred to as astronomical units? All right. So the idea of the astronomical units is it acknowledges from a so that yes, our solar system is heliocentric, but we're measuring our solar system geocentrically, meaning the Earth from the sun is 1. And then everything else closer to the sun and farther away from the Earth are decimal points. So for example, the astronomical unit of Mercury is 0.39. All right. The astronomical unit of Venus is 0.72. And then we have Earth is 1. So then we go to Mars, and well, to Mars farther from, so Mars is 1.52. But for example, let's look at a common aspect of, let's say, troublesome or something that would be very problematic in the human life expression. Mars squared Uranus. So, oh, well, Mars squared Uranus. So I say Mars squared Uranus. So I have an English sentence. Mars squared is a verb function. It could be a sextile, it could be a trine, it could be a semi-sextile, but whatever's there is a verb function. And then Uranus is the object. Well, the idea of astrology is the verb function goes bidirectional. So it's not against, Mars is squared to Uranus, but Uranus is squared to Mars. However, if I change the labels, meaning the names, so if I would say planet 1.52 is in a squared aspect to planet 19.18. So I just said the same thing. I said Mars is squared to Uranus, but when I reduce the planet to numbers based upon a measurement, it loses all meaning. And we know this because if you look at what the astrophysicists, they run out of names. Stars have numbers. They have numbers, and they have names later. So the point I would like to share about this is that by identifying the planetary names and looking at as you say, well, what's the mechanism of action of astrology? Because of my birth, my time, I say, okay, this is, well, how do those things that really affect me as an effect? Well, I have to have an identification with them first. So what I would be doing is I'm looking at my astrological chart like a script of a Greek drama.
Well,
and in that particular regard, you see, then I have my own life script. But the idea is, how do I make those things activated in my life to bring out the character of either going to be a progression, a transit, or its own intrinsic quality. And then it goes back to the idea of how do I meditate upon those activities? So the idea now is, how do I use my breath in an invocative and evocative manner? And this was the information that I was sharing a couple of weeks ago with the link to those 14 resources of how individuals have to say, well, what's the key symbolism of the 360 degrees of the zodiacal wheel itself?
Right.
That the Vedic astrology has some real nice contributions to make, and the Vedic astrology had been mutually influenced by Hellenistic astrology. But I see one of the symbolic limitations of Vedic astrology is it's not presented in a wheel. It's got little square boxes and stuff. So the idea of Western astrology having a wheel in and itself suggests a sense of holism, rather than compartmentalization of how the Vedic thing sets up. However, in that particular regard, like if I want to activate something in my particular chart, I can go to the Sabian symbol to give me again more of an imagery rather than just a number. But it's what the number represents as a symbol. Well, how do I activate that symbolization within my own life? So now we get back to this Jungian principle of individuation. And Jung, in his research, he was just a muddle fuddle, kind of fuddle the I'm a psychiatrist and let's do some medicine stuff. But he had this Lutheran spiritual background about him, and he was a Catholic kind of a guy as well. So he wanted to get this idea of the spiritualism involved. So he went back into the literature about Western alchemy, and was able to transform the literalism of Western alchemy into a spiritual process. So he had, the psychological types. So he would look at it and say, well, I have the psychological types of intuition, sensation, thinking, and feeling. And so the Myers-Briggs people, they go, well, oh guys, that's kind of like 4. Well, how about we translate those into the elements, earth, air, fire, and water. So now we have the opportunity of looking at the Jungian psychology as an opportunity to integrate a psychological process into an astrological understanding. And the point I would like to share on this from my personal experience is, one of the reasons why I'm not able to be here on a regular basis, because I instruct Tai Chi and Qigong. So my activity into like a lot of Qigong activities is realizing that the Taoists had systems of alchemy as well, although it had a different name. But the idea that what Qigong does is very specific about the breath. And the Tai Chi, everything's supposed to go slow. But it goes slow with the breath. So that the idea here is I have an inhalation, there's a pause, I've initiated a move. I have then an exhalation, I'm executing a move, and I have another pause. So the whole idea of how Tai Chi and Qigong operates is an intentionality of focusing the breath. Now, in Hathic yoga practices, they like that, but they more sit. But they don't really talk about the kumbhaka, 4-cycle breathing, until later in the practice. However, the Tai Chi Qigong, it's all about movement. And in my mind, you see, I go back to the idea of how do I activate the planets in my chart? And this goes to the idea of invocation and evocation. So when I was sharing that, when I was asking a few weeks ago how many people were familiar with the works of Franz Bardon, and this idea of the planetary genies considered on the zones circling the Earth, which is 360 degrees. So the idea here now is I can take correlates of where, just like I'm using a Rudhyar symbol, I take the correlate to the planetary intelligence associated with an aspect of my chart, and then I go, okay, this allows me an opportunity of a psychological and psychic engagement within that particular type of polarization, which would be kind of like an app, an internet app, but it's an internet app that connects me to the larger process, which goes back to the Antakarana and the very function of Chiron. Because part of this thing about the Chiron and this idea of Jung wrote about what the wounded healer, huh? And that phrase has kind of stuck and it got plastered on to the Chiron function. Well, it wasn't really that Chiron was wounded. It was an unhealed wound. So actually Chiron would be called an unhealed healer. And the only way that Chiron could be healed was his death and then put up in this as a star to live immortally. So the point about this is individuals' experience on being incarnated in the planet is that separation of spirit into matter. But here we go over that Sagittarian cross in the middle, is that the involution of spirit into matter, memory is lost because the ego then defines itself as its own identity. And then the individual has to grow beyond their identity to allow that identity to melt and go back to the larger unit. And this is part of the, and you say, well, the spiritual ascension process. But a person goes, well, what is the process? I don't know the process. Well, a person's got to start and say, why don't you start with your own astrology chart? And say, well, take it back to when a person was a child. Say, when a person's learning how to read, say, well, Mom, Dad, read me another story. And those stories are generally fairy tales, which are based upon mythologies. And when we look about the mythologies, a man or a woman, everyone is going to identify with the protagonist and not identify with an antagonist. But we see a lot of Greek trauma, and all we've got to do, Greek drama, I'm sorry, and look at common entertainment, and we see how characters have levels of protagonists and antagonists in them. And as we engage in, let's say, watching a movie or listening to a play, we identify our sense of self with some aspect of that character in the drama. Tales of Brave Ulysses, all right? You know, a Neptune hero. So Ulysses then will have a very strong correspondence to people who would have Neptunian themes in their particular type of chart. So the idea then is like, whether a person accepts astrology or not, I say, well, just look at it like this. Here is the numbers of your birth, and look at this as like, you are an actor and you're being hired to do a movie, and the director gives you a script to read. You say, read this script, Stephen. Do you like it? So, well, yeah, I can get behind that. So the idea here, as we have our astrology chart, we've been given a script to remind us of what the reason was that we were born in the planet in the first place, in terms of being that reascension, going back to that divine presence, which goes to the Chiron thing, as like, you know, he was the bastard son thrown on the earth because, you know, all he wanted to do is be close to mom. You know, why'd mom reject me? You know, it's the issue of betrayal and abandonment. And those become very alienating principles in our own daily life. Not only do we feel disconnected from our cosmic connectedness, but in terms of day-to-day living, we often feel disconnected and abandoned by people around us. People talk about, let's say, okay, forgiveness. One of the more difficult things to forgive is that of betrayal. Yeah. All right. If a stranger assaults me, say, oh yeah, well, you know, they were impoverished, or they had mental illness. Okay, fine, I forgive you, brother. But I'll tell you what, if a very close friend or a family member does something that is really hurtful, I go, my God, you motherfucker, if you're going to do that to me, you're going to do this to everybody. So the idea is that the idea of betrayal really goes deep within the human heart and that of abandonment. But all that has to do with the idea of being separated from the sense of the other. The point being is that when a person starts studying astrology, they have to start off with the nuts and bolts. It's a toolkit. So the idea is it's always going to start off exoterically, but the idea is an individual develops themselves into the symbolization behind astrology. Now it moves to another level of mind. And this goes back to the Vedantic principle, as we say, like the mind, but in the Vedantic principle, you're going to have levels of mind. You're going to have, you know, the emotional desire mind, which has an operational definition of the kama manas, and then you're going to have the concrete mind, which has the operational term of the rupa manas, and then you have the abstract mind, which has the operational definition of the arupa manas. Well, this idea of mind and the sense of abstraction has to grow within the individual. And this is where then the individual, as they involve themselves into the symbolization of what is represented by that symbol in an active process, going back to invocation and evocation. So in my personal experience, I find it inevitable that all astrological consideration eventually moves to esoteric astrology. And one of the principles behind esoteric astrology is the idea that all of our current astrological paradigms are part of an illusion, because we are interpreting them through our particular human mechanism, and only by getting into that sense of that state of mind which becomes non-dual. Because the state of mind that becomes non-dual, then polarities collapse, and of course there then becomes that fusion, that all is one. both good and bad, mean and nice, light and dark, all those become kind of one. To do that, though, the individual has to involve themselves in a process of invocation and evocation within the qualities within their own chart. But those things aren't really talked about. And what I wanted to share was kind of like, you know, hey, this stuff kind of really works. I could say, well, the proof is it works really well for me. And the idea of being able to share this engagement of using the 4-cycle breath in terms of idea of I want to shift my brainwave so at least I'm open to the radio channel. And this is why I will use the 4-cycle breathing before I go to sleep. Because a lot of people say, oh, no, don't meditate before you go to sleep because you'll just fall asleep. The point being is, yes, I want to go to sleep, but I want to be able to open the door for the infusion to come down. You know, like for myself, my particular natal chart, I have Uranus in my first house in Cancer. Okay, Cancer, Uranus. Okay, it's a generational thing. You know, a lot of people have it. However, I have a trine of Uranus to my 10th house cusp. I would call that then my angle of self-externalization, which happens to be Pisces. And my north node of my moon in Pisces conjunct my 10th house cusp. Well, now I have Uranus in Cancer in a trine position to my north node of the moon and the 10th house cusp itself. So since Uranus is outside the orbit of Saturn and it's an unseen planet, how do I activate that? That's my question. So Stephen, it's in your first house. It's a tool. It's a tool right on your tool belt. It's right there. How do I activate it? Well, the idea is since that's bigger than myself, I have to quiet my personal ego so I can hear what's being said to me. Very soft whispers. The idea of the muses, right? They just right there. Little muses right there. So getting back to this idea of the breathing. So when I'm preparing myself for the sleep, I'm doing a ceremonial ritual where I'm going to calm my ego because I want to put it to sleep. I want to put the barking dog to sleep and allow that those other levels of my mind, the Rupa and the Arupa Manas, to be open to be receiving. And I can do my brainwave. So the idea now is if I'm in a dream state, you say, oh, people will do lucid dreaming, but then it's just a glamorization of my own sense of self because there I am. Oh, that's me. I get to fly, I get to do all this. However, let's take it underneath and go to delta wave. So now I've put myself almost in an anesthetic state of anesthesia. So now this infusion I've charged, I've done a vaulting process. And then the button's pushed, light goes on, and then there comes a download of information. Now, do I understand that download of information from these Trans-Saturnian type of influences? No, but my brain is trying to figure it out, so it's going to use symbolisms. And then I'm going to have follow-up dreams related to that information. The point being that these symbolisms, you see, repeat themselves because it becomes an anthropological process of how culture works creation myth. And when we look at creation myth from a cosmogenic point of view, you say, well, I'm part, that little spark of the divine, which has to do with fractal recursivity, this descent of spirit into matter. Well, now I get to create a universe within myself as expressed within my own natal chart. And then it goes out. Now the idea then is, well, how do people get together? Because this whole idea is about group consciousness. What we're doing right here is a group conscious activity that we wouldn't have been able to do a mere 10 years ago.
That's true.
But we know that 100 years from now, what we're doing is going to be greatly enhanced, and that there's going to be individuals who have this sense of a connectiveness. Now, this idea of the connectedness then allows an individual to focus their strength and energy as a group. And getting back to Lauren's point of view, it was what binds people together. different cultures. But the idea now, when we have music and song, now we're talking about the breath again. And even in musical notes, there's always pauses. There's always pauses, but each note is defined. And in this particular regard, what I would like to share for those of you who are wanting to get into your own chart, but to say, how do I make, what's the mechanism of action for these activating principles? And say, well, I've got to be able to involve myself in a way that represents this movement. And I can do it through the breathing practice, four cycle breathing. Now,
I'm very sorry to
what I'm saying here, I was extemporaneously prepared, and I had a lot to say, and I'm open for the input, but I appreciate everyone just kind of listening to what I had to share, because I did go a bit long there.
No problem at all. It's just that I thought Chloe at some point wanted to ask you a question, and she also wanted to share something related to what you just said earlier. So I suggest we make a very quick pause, just 5 minutes, if you guys want, just a quick break. And when we come back, Chloe, you can share with us. Oh, did she disappear just now? I think she will be back. She said she wanted to share something in regards to what you said earlier on tarot.
And I also have things to share from your listening,
Let me just
expounding on it as well.
Yeah, it's just let's
All right.
try to have a
Quiet,
conversation.
but I love listening to Stephen. I can
Oh my.
follow you very, very well. I just almost have things I like to expand on. Okay, I'm gonna
Yes, me
go
too.
for 5
Okay.
minutes.
So Chloe, just to let you know,
Hello.
we're doing
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, my Wi-Fi dropped. I'm so
No
sorry.
problem.
That's why I tried to
No
join right
problem at
away.
all. I just wanted to tell you we're having a 5-minute break, and when we come
Okay.
back, you can share with us what you wanted to say earlier.
Oh, sure. Thank you so much. Okay,
Please.
I'll share when we get back. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, are you guys back?
I am. One person, two persons. It's hard to gauge 5 minutes, but
Yes, I'm not sure it was exactly 5 minutes, but
the idea was do what you need to do and get back there quick.
that's right. That's right. Okay, we'll
And
see.
I am glad for Stephen having an opportunity to speak about astrology for him and his Stephen, I'm glad you speak about what it is you speak about. It's very there is this blend of how I'm using astrology in my life. I don't want to usurp Chloe though, since she's the first one that you wanted
No,
to have.
go ahead, Lauren. I think by the time she's back, you can go first, and then
Anyway, these are the things that were stimulated for me. Is that one of my teachers for so many years has been Drumbalo Melchizedek. When I started with him in 1983. Before he even wrote books. And one thing he said is that people are identified by higher forms of life or higher energy, sometimes by the way they breathe. And I listened to that and I remembered it, but it isn't till I'm now doing meditation on a daily basis, which does have that inhale, pause, etc. That all of a sudden I'm in a different plane of consciousness because of the way I'm using my breath. It brings me into I become multidimensional. I don't know how to explain it, really term what happens, but my whole form of experience changes. Breath and the use of breath in a very specific and that level change. And also a Native American practitioner, the elements of astrology and the elements in the world are very precious. And they are our common form that we share. So the way they're divided up into planets is very interesting. And I like that you say by giving them names, we have a way of formulating relationship between ourself parts, the parts of ourselves. We can understand more of how our basic personality structure is functioning and how we can help it function and when it doesn't function. But those were things that really were stimulated too, that the honoring of all the elements, and as humanity, right now, it's so important. I think, you can have your opinions, but we all share the air. So let's keep it clean. We can have our opinions about this or that, but please, we all have the water on the planet. And besides the wonderful life forms that are there that we may not understand, such as the whales and the dolphins and what they're coming from, we need to drink water. And let's try to, as a society, hold that recognition and honoring these elements. And if fire is spirit, that we honor inside ourselves the inspirational spiritual aspect that we're given by being given a body and an incarnation. And then earth, yes, that we all know. Sometimes people think I live in a more I do live in a very beautiful place, and I do cultivate nature and beauty around me. But wherever you go, nature is beautiful, and we have that in common. So let's make sure all humans get to have a relationship with nature by preserving its what it needs to function. So that idea of letting the ego come down from I want, I desire, da 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 da, but also have that balance between I'm allowed to have my opinions and all the rest of it, but there's things I share with all the other humans that are on the planet at this time, and that's kind of like that circle of the whole, that I'm allowed to expand my talents and do my choice of activity each day as much as I'm allowed to, through balancing the whole financial and everything. But that sense of wholeness that we share as humanity, so that we can have as many people, having a healthy opportunity, a life with opportunity is important.
Yes, Laura.
I'm done. I see Chloe's back for her, whatever she wanted to share.
Your turn, Chloe.
Hello.
Waiting for you.
Hello, thank you. I really liked what Laura and Stephen have shared. I was listening the whole time. So a lot of things were already brought up by Lauren, actually, that I wanted to share and ask. So I'm going to set those aside for now. But I did want to share some of my thoughts, if I may. Please bear with me. So I am a tarot reader, and I, through the lens, it's more counseling, I would say, but using cards as sort of the medium and spirituality. So I wanted to first discuss about the Gemini and Sagittarius cards in the major arcana of the tarot, because that is what we were talking about, and that's one of the points of Stephen that I was really it sort of like lit a spark when he was talking about it, because he talked about like how the breath is sort of the foundation of all things, and how that will help us align with that activation in our charts. So I have my tarot cards here. So I wanted to share again the Gemini and the Sagittarius axis. So the Gemini card is the Lovers. So it's here. I hope you guys can see it. But the Gemini card is the Lovers, whereas the Sagittarius card is Temperance. So even on an imagery level, it's really interesting that, to me at least, especially with what Stephen said, and all that we were talking about polarities and how we interact with one another, I feel like that's such a mercurial thing, and I feel like it's also relevant because we're also moving into a Mercury retrograde period. So Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and as well the Lovers here, to me, it's very interesting how the Lovers, throughout the major arcana, this is the first deck with this is the first card with more than one person in the imagery. So to me, that's really interesting when it came to like the body and how we interact with each other. Um, one of my favorite psychologists that when I was studying was Bronfenbrenner, and uh, the theory was the ecological systems theory, if I'm not mistaken. So that's about the interaction and interplay between like us and what makes us. So I'm gonna go more into it because Guarav, I hope I am pronouncing your name right, also shared some information in the chat about like body parts. So I also, that's also something that I was hoping to talk about in one of my questions. But to me, Bronfenbrenner is one of them. To me, his work has been really formative for me in terms of um, how I interact with people and how I treat myself in terms of specifically my own healing process. Stephen mentioned a while ago, like about Chiron and how he's more of like an unhealed healer rather than the wounded healer that Jung has shared prior. So, to me, one of the, I guess, in my own personal life, how that's manifested or how it's activated my chart. So I have for your reference, I have a very active 10th and 11th house. So in my 10th house is in Aries, and I have my Venus, Saturn, and Mercury there. And then my 11th house is Taurus and whole sign. And there I have my Sun and Mars. Cancer rising. If I hope I got that right as well with Stephen. I think he mentioned that a while ago. So to me, I've learned and have been activated a lot by the people that I've come to interact with, whether it was on a minuscule level, like just someone who passed by and commented something to me, or, you know, throughout my own long-standing relationships, whether it be friends, family, or even lovers. Lovers. Okay. So that was one of the things that I was interested in because when it comes to the temperance card in the major arcana, this is an angel. And one of the things that Stephen mentioned a while ago in particular was like about meditation and transcendence, if I'm not mistaken. And this temperance card is sort of that what he said encapsulated into a card or an image, because this temperance card is an angel levitating above water, and as well the enlightenment denoted by the rays coming from their head. So I thought that was really interesting, and to me that's sort of like, oh, when we meet with each other and when we're able to interact with each other, you know, after that consideration or how we are transformed by our dealings with others, we're also able to elevate ourselves. Because going back a bit to Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory, which is also very, I would say, sociological in that aspect, is because if you look it up, it's one of the more famous illustrations of it is it's circles like that. So they're circles, one inside each other. At the very center is us, and then what surrounds us is our parents and our friends or siblings, close, you know, people who are close to us. And then outside of that is the systems we are in. And then when you go further and further, it eventually comes into the chrono system. So that's the aspect of time that, you know, is affecting us. So I thought that was really interesting because Stephen, I think, also mentioned about how charts, especially in tropical astrology, are drawn as circles. So there's that wholeness to that. So what I wanted to share next was about going back to the universal laws. So I've done a lot of studies on the universal laws, and it's really interesting because it's an ever evolving process for me and my own meditations. So one of the universal laws is the law of oneness. So the fourth one, if I'm not mistaken, is the law of attraction, which has interestingly gained traction recently, along with the more spiritual movement coming into play, along with the how astrology has flowed more into the mainstream nowadays. So I found that very interesting. But at the same time, the third law in the universal laws is as above, so below. So I thought that was relevant in this instance because, when we go back to the planets that are associated with the signs in rulerships, what's this? Mercury is a very, to me, the energy of Mercury is very like, it's very lateral in that sense, but the scope is wide. So that's my initial interaction with Mercury energy to me. So it's very lateral and wide. So it's able to go to many places. And at the same time, the Jupiter energy for me, the Jovian energy, it's a very like top down sort of energy. So it's things going back to the as above, so below. It's sort of seeing things in a more macro level because of the expansiveness of Jupiter and what that knowledge imparts on us. And then it's sort of, while I was listening to Lauren speak a while ago, I was also, and reading what Gaurav had sent in the chat, I was super interested in how, since you did mention that you all meditate, or most of you at least meditate, that there's a very interesting correlation, I would say, with the chakra system as well as the astrological signs. So, and also a correlation. Sorry, this is more of a tangent, but there's also a correlation in, if you've been familiar with what's that? The needs triangle. I forgot what it's called. But yes, the hierarchy of needs. Thank you so much. Yes, that's the one. So I was also doing studies on that and how, if you notice where, this is, the top is the crown chakra, whereas our feet is sort of connected to the earth. And that's also connected to the root chakra. So I thought that was really interesting because when you put into like what Gaurav has sent, and also when you go into astrology where the signs are correlated with different body parts, it's really interesting that where Aries is mostly associated with like very everyday matters and Pisces is transcendent in that sense, just to keep it like very short and quick. But it's interesting because Pisces is connected to the feet, which would be in the chakra system, it would be with the root chakra, whereas Aries is connected to more of the crown chakra because it's the head and third eye. So I thought that was really interesting because, it's sort of that going back to the idea of things being one and how things are all interconnected with each other. And at the same time, it's sort of bringing us back to what Stephen has said, which was like about the breath, because thinking about meditation and practicing meditation for me, I am unable to sit still most of the time when it comes to meditation. And at the same time, I have a very difficult time doing yoga. However, I have had much success in Tai Chi. I just wanted to share that because Stephen mentioned it. But to me, my meditative practice has been like when I'm doing housework. So whether that's, being in the flow of cleaning dishes or, sweeping in our veranda, I noticed that that's when my mind has been most, and also that's when I'm in my most relaxed state. So I also find it interesting that a while ago when Lauren was talking about like her walking groups and how, we may have different polarities, but we're able to share something. And at the same time, the difficulty of like when you tell someone to relax, it's different for everyone because some people have different needs in their life. Like for me, my body sort of needs to be in emotion before I'm able to calm my thoughts. So I thought that was interesting because breath work has been so helpful to me. Like, because I have struggled with anxiety, and that's when I would relate it to being very in my head. So when I bring it back to being grounded and being in my body, that's I use it. I do that through breath work. So I thought that was very interesting in terms as well of the Gemini Sagittarius axes, because my Gemini was this in whole sign houses. Gemini is in my 12th house. Gemini is, yes, that's right. Yes. So to me, it's very subconscious to me, and I find it difficult to like do stuff there. Like when I'm told to sit still or dig deep, it's a bit difficult for me, and that's how that's manifested in my life. Whereas my 6th house is Sagittarius, so I find it easier in my daily life to think about bigger picture things. So it's, to me, it's been like that sort of balancing of energies as well. So yeah, really interesting, and I really appreciated what Stephen has shared, because I'm also very into very esoteric topics. So thank you very much, and also what Lauren has shared. So thank you.
Thank you too, Chloe. You also shared very interesting things with us. It's a very Gemini Sagittarius day today, isn't it? We are naturally revolving around, especially the Gemini side of things, and I can see there is so much Gemini energy coming from Stephen, who is, kind of keeping talking about many different aspects and taking us on a journey. Now you, Chloe, in a similar way. So today is the last day before we enter Gemini tomorrow. Maybe that's why we are kind of in anticipation mode,
The cusp.
wanting to. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a Sagittarian question.
Yes, Dwayne?
It comes out of last week's session on Chiron. And there's a particular passage in Barbara Hand Clow's book on Chiron, the first one,
Mm-hmm.
which
The Rainbow
I'm
Bridge.
yeah. On page 98, she talks about Chiron in Sagittarius and about the group of us that were born with Chiron in Sagittarius, and how in 1987 to 89, we experienced our Uranus oppositions. And she cites this as a group who ensouled at that time and who are bringing forth teachings around the kind of activation that Stephen was talking about, and that we're all kind of oriented to, this ascension process that we're engaged in. And I'm curious to know within this group who has Chiron in Sagittarius. Are there any others besides myself?
I have it in Capricorn.
Capricorn.
Okay, well,
Chiron is in Capricorn for me.
so for you, you're saying Dwayne is in Sagittarius. Well, that sounds a little strange. Maybe I'm miscalculating in my head, but I have it in the opposite one, in Gemini. So how come? So is it people that are, it's because of the irregularity of the cycle of Chiron, isn't it? That we're in this situation. Yeah, as you, I'm not sure exactly how many years between us we have, but I was expecting a wider range, not an opposition in the, but it's interesting that we have an opposition. Maybe, I'm not sure. I haven't checked it.
And I thought we weren't that different in age. I was born in 53,
Mm-hmm.
and I have it in Capricorn.
So yeah, there are certain years where Chiron moves a lot faster than in others.
Mhm.
So as far as I know, from the moment it's in Leo to Sagittarius, this section of the zodiac, when it's closest to Saturn, so from Leo to Sagittarius, and especially in the middle, when it's in Libra, I think it stays, I think the shortest time in Virgo Libra. You can check that out one more time, but it stays a lot longer in Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and so on. So my generation, the Gemini, Chiron in Gemini generation was pretty big. Yeah, so there were several years when people have it in Gemini. So, but it's interesting that at the same time, every 50 years, we have the return on time. So people that are 50 years apart, approximately, which is very common between grandchildren and their grandparents. Yeah. And I think Barbara Henkel was the one that I read. She was saying that this may explain to a great deal why there is a special connection of spiritual understanding, and not just spiritual, but also in many different levels, that is usually built between grandparents and grandchildren, that is lacking between the parent and the child. Yeah, almost like the parent and the child are feeling like they're from a different world in a way, while there is this special bond with the grandparents. And I have been thinking about this a lot because my grandparents happen to be very close to 50 years from me, and I was raised by them mostly. So I almost felt like they were my couple of parents, and I was more like in their party, let's say. And my mother was there too, but she was like from another dimension in a way, to both me and them. So maybe, I don't know if you've observed the same thing. And if you have grandchildren, did any of you have grandchildren 50 years from you? No?
No.
No, my children aren't married yet.
And it also works very well with people who are teachers, and they already say, if you are in your 60s and you're a teacher of youngsters, and the moment that the difference becomes 50 between you and them, this age group is particularly attuned to you. So you may be, say, a primary school teacher, and in year 2, year 1, year 4, nothing special. But those students that are in year 3, they are very, very close to you in a way. There is a special rapport built because of this Chiron connection. So, Dwayne, I'm sorry if I diverted from what you wanted to point out. So,
Oh, no.
anybody else is.
Great. So, Stephen, I'm curious where your Chiron is.
It's even your sound microphone.
There we go. My Chiron is in the 7th house, and it was Chiron in the particular time that I was born was in a lengthy retrograde period. So my Chiron is using the Placidus system. I end up being a 0 degree Chiron 0. So I look at that as a salient point. It lays the inner and outer dynamics of my particular chart manifestation. So in that particular.
But are you Capricorn, Sagittarius? Which one?
So the Chiron is 0 degrees Capricorn 0. So I'm right on the beginning of the Capricorn 1st degree, and I kind of internalize that in my own particular style, because as much as I seek affiliation with others have been denied to me. So that whole 7th house, it becomes almost kind of this later point in my life that now I'm able to kind of express and extend that Chiron applicability. And that has a lot to do with, again, for me having the opportunity to, again, feel myself more into the symbolism, what Chiron represents, the separation of the one from the other. And so being in the 7th house, that's reflected analogically in that I don't have a lot of immediate social contact. So I've kind of been in a sense of solitude. It helps define my solitude in a way when I was younger was quite disappointing, but now it allows me, okay, I have now this open time to develop more research experience, and then now I get to share that with other people as far as what we're doing here symbolically and metaphorically. So that way my Chiron ends up being it's redemptive process. So then I get that reunion back from what the Chiron suggested. And what I also included there, the link, Dwayne, to a site that explains about how the bodhicitta of the mind works for establishing this reconnection of the ascension of matter back to spirit, which of course is this whole path of Chiron, which is again I wanted to listen to the recording of the Chiron presentation before this week because I wanted to be able to add some comment to it, but I'll just kind of wait on that. But
And it was so good. Radilina did a knockout job for that Chiron. I really loved it.
This will be a returning theme. I think this Chiron issue is a returning theme. Why? Because it manifested in our own lives. It wasn't like talking about, the discovery of the other planets at a time when none of us were born. We are all kind of living in this 1977 transitional world. Now, Chloe, when were you born?
I was born in 98.
Oh, okay, because you're a fresh flaked flower. So I go, well, okay.
Did you say 98, Chloe? I just didn't hear.
Sorry?
What year did you say? 98?
Yes,
Oh
1998.
my God. In my mind, 98 means 5 years old.
I am 5 years old.
No, this is just a joke. It's just, yeah, I'm getting used to getting older too, which is anyway. So where is your Chiron?
My Chiron is in my 5th house of Scorpio in whole sign houses.
Interesting. Very interesting. So, Stephen, I was going to look up your chart, but I couldn't find it because on the other computer is where I have it. But I wanted to see your progressions. I was wondering about this 0-degree Capricorn Chiron. If it's retrograde, it means it was coming from Capricorn actually towards the 0-degree. I don't know if we realize that. And I was thinking by progression, maybe at some point it turned the other way, the other direction. And could it be that later in life it turned? Have you checked that?
Yeah, I'm bringing up. I did. I don't use the progressions. What I use the solar arc. So I use my progressions through the solar arc.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Whatever method you use, I wonder if this special moment when maybe you don't have it at all because Chiron is pretty slow, and some people do get through such a moment in their life, others don't. When a retrograde planet by progression becomes direct, or the other way around. It wasn't retrograde, but becomes retrograde by progression. And I've noticed that this always accounts for a shift, for a change in how this thing functions in you.
Well, I pulled up my chart now, and I did a solar arc for my birthday, which is coming up here in June, and my Chiron now is in my 7th house, but it's progressed to Pisces.
Right, but is it direct or retrograde?
It's direct.
So at some point in the way, it went direct. It will be interesting if in your own time you can check when was that, when it went direct. What year? So kind of with solar arc, you're counting every year like the sun, isn't it? So you're moving Chiron 1 degree per year. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
well, I don't want you to waste any time now, looking for this. Don't worry too much. It's just an idea that you may look for this and see what year it turned, because it may be.
This is a shift in topic, but I just wanted to, while you're looking for that, Chloe, I just want to tell you for at least 40 years, I've been working tarot and use them when as a way to talk to myself with when I'm helping clients. And I don't always reveal to people that I'm using it necessarily, and sometimes I do, but it has a deep relationship with me and also the astrology.
Yes.
Yes, I relate to that a
One
lot.
day as a topic, we could do it.
Oh,
And I
that
know
would be so
life
fun.
has that kind of thing too. The planets with the tree of life and the tarot deck and all that. I mean, it's a many, as I started out with the JJ Hertalk we all live in a many and one universe. And that's the first thing that's said in the J.J. Hurtak book, The Keys of Enoch. Rung true. It's lots of variations and ways of connecting the whole.
I'd like to add there for Lauren, since Lauren, both you and Chloe are involved yourself with the tarot and astrology. I'd like to add this particular thought. Do each of you do an event chart when you do a tarot reading? If I do a tarot reading, I have a time date group, and then I will do an event chart of that particular reading. So because I'm looking at the chart being more holistic, and I'm looking at the tarot being more practical, because the cards are down to earth. The cards are down to earth, but I want to make a connection between what's down to earth is a divinatory process. It's a divinatory process what I'm doing. I'm divining, I'm getting an omen, I'm getting a reading, again, downloading an app, and it's coming out in this pictorial design. And so if I want to get a larger connectedness, I'll always make a correlate, do the tarot reading with an event chart. And what's nice about, again, this modern world is having computer programs. I just plug it in, and then I keep a double correlation between the tarot reading and the chart. And then much the same way, before I do a tarot reading, I'll get into this breath thing where I'll do charging and vaulting.
So Stephen, what chart do you do?
And then lay out the cards. And so Chloe, I was curious of what type of preparatory work you do before you do a reading.
Oh, I have to like meditate, and I can't really eat before my tarot reading or the day of my tarot reading. So right now, because I am at home. Oh, and I think also Radilina asked something.
No, go ahead.
About the chart.
Afterwards.
Okay. So for me, when I was able to read for other people, in person, I guess, I would really set up my space, and I wouldn't be able to eat like the whole at least the day until my tarot reading. So to me, that's sort of like cleansing, quote unquote, my body as like sort of the medium for which I do it, because I guess what would best describe me as HSP, highly sensitive person. So I get very overwhelmed when it comes to like even sensorial things. So whether that be like sounds or anything like that, I really need to take a long time to prepare. And even mentally, I have to prepare before I go out and socialize and all of that. However, now my practice, I've needed to be in a secluded space more off. So because right now I had to move back home with my parents because of the whole pandemic situation. So whenever I do my readings, I tell them the day beforehand, like, oh, hey, I'm gonna have a tarot reading. Please don't disturb me. So, because I also have younger siblings. So sometimes they like to listen in just to see what I do, because I'm the eldest of 5 children. So they do like to see what I do, and sometimes I really have to tell them like, okay, you can listen, but please don't talk to me, or please don't do anything. So I really sort of, as much as I can, trying to keep a sacred. Also, like mentally, it helps me prepare to like cast a circle and all of that. But I will try to look into it, like looking for a chart for the day of, because that's not something that I've tried. Although I do look at transits when I share information with my clients, because surprisingly, a lot of them are also interested in astrology. So, when I can, I do look into that to help inform the energies in a more collective sense.
But the question that you were asking, Radilina, was what is the same one I had too, is what chart do you do for the event of the day? Do you do that person's chart, or do you do the chart of the United States, your location? What chart? How do you set up the parameters in your mind? This is a question.
No, I think Stephen said an event chart. So my question was actually whether is it a horary chart of the moment of the reading, or is it of some particular event that the client wants to do the reading about? So one of those two things, though.
The event chart is the time of laying out the cards. That's the event.
The horary. It's like mixing horary charts with tarot, which is, I think, makes a lot of sense if you remember.
Not horary, because I'm not really asking a yes/no question.
Oh, but horary is not just
Oh,
about
it's
yes, no.
open-ended. So that doesn't make it horary anymore. It makes it an event.
Okay, well, when I say horary, I mean using the chart of the moment for clarification of something. Now, the rest of it is about how we read the chart. And if we follow the traditional rules of horary, of course, it will be something specific, but I kind of expand on this. And when I think about horary, to me, this is a little modernized version of horary, where you cast the chart of the moment, but you look at it more from a holistic perspective, and you kind of don't analyze it in this yes or no, good or bad, or particular, you're looking for a particular answer, but again, broadly, like we would normally do with a chart of an event. But I found it very interesting because I think these two things, particularly the tarot and the event chart, let's say, of the moment of interaction with the person, they are very similar. They're just two different options, two different tools of bringing up the same thing. And when you see them together, you can have this reinforced team. Maybe the teams will repeat themselves. And my personal experimentation has been to draw a card, just one card, before every reading. I ask the cards after I'm already prepared for the reading, and it's like 10 minutes before we start, and I haven't called the person yet. I ask the cards, what do you think? What should I concentrate as a team mostly, or look for as a team out of all of those things, all these pieces that I identified? What stands out? Or where should I start from the conversation? Because normally it's an unknown person that you don't know, don't know a lot about. So it's been amazing in the last 10 or 15 times that I did that, how relevant the card always was to the person, to the situation, to the chart, to everything. So I don't know how they work, but they work in a way. And I had
Well, thank you for sharing that, because now here is an example, another example of another person utilizing astrology and tarot at the same time. And and a lot of times these fields are kind of separated, kind of like a little bubble or something. They have a semi-permeable membrane, but they end up being separate fields. The point you make is a really nice one, and the one I wanted to share with Chloe, because again, Chloe, congratulations for you on being such a fresh rosebud here in the garden of life. Because you're going to be taking these things in a way that didn't have the opportunity for these other individuals. And the point I would like to share is that on laying an astrological reading in front of an individual is one thing of symbolisms, but when a person has cards laid before them, they have like the TV screen. And then they can really engage within the symbolism. And here, Radilina, you're talking about, you're just doing a one card reading for yourself before the reading even happens. So this integration of both of them together is that they're not really separate at all. And Chloe, I'd like to share self-disclosure. In terms of when I was 18, 19 years old, I was immediately attracted to the tarot. But when my mentor came into my life, this woman said, no, Stephen, learn astrology first and do a tarot second. And so, okay, I'll check that out. And then I started getting into astrology and I go, holy, this opens the thing up. And so now I'm able to go back to the tarot in a much more meaningful manner, because as you said, the intrinsicness of the astrological correlates, especially related to path working. And now we're back into an invocative and evocative process of how the individual is transforming their life in this pictorial form, but it's also correlated to, let's say, because see, with the computers, you can do you can combine the charts. I can do an event chart of the reading and do the event chart of the reading correlated with the natal chart of the individual of the reading, correlated back to my natal chart because of transference, countertransference, and then I have this collective thing again where the two people come together in a single interaction. My Gemini is activating somewhere in their Gemini chart. Whatever they have in their chart is interacting with my chart. We both come together in this kind of meeting of the minds on whatever plane it kind of works with. But the idea of using both of these tools together you know, it's kind of like a as a regular toolkit. And so this is why for Chloe, I was wanting to encourage you to kind of like, well, if this woman's into the tarot, and she's also here doing the astrology, making an effort of putting both these together is going to be is going to open up an avenue for you that that you might have been curious about. But I would encourage you to say, man, drive down that highway.
Oh, it's really interesting because I do appreciate, I do fully appreciate what you've shared with me. And it's really interesting because as I've shared as well, I did start with more like practical, quote unquote, things like studying psychology in university, more into like I guess it's more of a Piscean energy for myself, which is more expanding into astrology, tarot, so that I can have that more holistic view of it. For me, that's sort of activating in my north and south node, because that mine is in the axis of Virgo and Pisces in the 3rd and 9th houses. So that's really interesting, and I do appreciate. I will use it. I'll learn more and then use it in practice. Thank you very much.
And I was just going to say, I do very similar setup. Like I pretty much can only do one reading a day. And I multi-use many different, it's like multimedia. I check in with cards. I lay out the tarot cards, sometimes for myself and for a client. The first thing I do is I set up a Native American mesa to the directions and the center and the prayers I do prayers and meditate, but then I lay out, also I have taken the tarot cards and laid out 12 of them to represent the houses after I did all my prayers and intentions of what I'm asking for from, and then put the person in the center of it. And in the one. So, and then I do the Celtic, I do the 3, I do whatever occurs to me, because I've been utilizing all the methodologies for a long time. But then I can also pull the astrological chart, the tarot, the clairvoyant. I would consider myself, I didn't know the term highly sensitive person, but I am. And so have the listening and delivery. The idea is to help an individual who's coming to me using everything I can. And also sometimes myself, my life will be in a turmoil. I'll hit a problem and I will pull forth all my resources to listen to what's going on also, besides filtering my own process of feeling and asking the questions. Where is my discomfort coming from? Is it an ego thing? Is it a spirit thing? Is it someone else's energy? These questions, this Gemini questioning, helps define then and give me some sort of focus to where to take the experience.
Right. Maybe this is the moment to share something with you. You may know this, but because we're talking about tarot, do you guys know about this talk I did some time ago on tarot and astrology? Have you seen this?
No.
Oh,
Was I
not
there?
yet.
This was actually a webinar or something. It wasn't part of this group. It was separate
Okay.
last year. And here is on the channel. So you just need to go a little down.
Oh,
That's
nice.
not-
Here you'll find it. And
2 hours, 3 hours. Oh, very good.
I had my own interpretation about the major arcana, and some of the connections I offer you here are different, like something that's not in the books. It's just the way I felt it may be. So there are suggestions there. Don't take me, I mean, directly as there is no rule here. It's just an option to consider. So for example, there were cards like, well, I'm not sure that Sagittarius, for example, can really be connected to Temperance. Temperance really doesn't resonate with me when I know that in most books this is the one and it kind of is the only one left when you designate a card naturally to each one of the signs, we can do that directly.
How about the Hierophant?
Hold on, Lauren, because you were touching on something interesting there with the Hierophant. But there are many exceptions here, which I make out of the norm. Let's say, the Hierophant, because you brought it up, I really think this card is Chiron to me, definitely. And in most places, even in the standard deck, even in the, when I say standard, I mean the Raider White. There are so many different decks, but even in the Raider White, the other day I was looking into it, and I noticed that the keys are pictured. So there are two keys on the card symbol. Just trying to find it to show you. But anyway, in some of the decks, it's directly called that, Chiron, the Hierophant. So it's a lot to do with it, with especially with what I told you last week on Chiron. This inner guide, this higher authority of directing your consciousness, as Stephen explained today, this activated principle of solving your own completedness, let's say, and initiating the process of doing that. That's when I pull the Hierophant, or in most contexts, this is that don't rely on external authority, don't rely on any sort of, say, priests, teachers, gurus, religions, whatever it may be, any sort of authority that you're expecting a direct, easy answer from, but ask yourself and rely on your own judgment. And it doesn't need to be just intuitive. You can make research, you can ask other people for questions, you can listen to everything and everybody, but the point is the final decision or direction to be initiated by your own inner feeling. So
Oh, yes. I see Radilina. I have my deck here. So just for everyone's
yes.
reference, those are the
In the
keys.
bottom, yes, there are two keys, you see. So even there we have this allusion to Chiron.
My relationship to thinking about Sagittarius is as the truth seeker. That sometimes Sagittarius is the truth.
Yes, you know, Lauren, one of the versions of rulership for Chiron, which Melanie Reinhardt discusses in her book, she says that there is one more time a discussion there. What may be Chiron ruling in astrology? Because some people connected to Virgo, other people connected to Sagittarius, for example. There are other options too. So this connection with Sagittarius is because they're both centaurs, pictured on the mythological symbols, and there are many commonalities between. Even some say that once Chiron died, he became transformed into the constellation of Sagittarius, the stars. Yeah. So anyway, there are connections, but in the mythic tarot, maybe do you know the mythic tarot? This is what this talk is mostly based on. So I show the mythic tarot, and then I tell the story about the myth. And then I make some other astrological connection to it, not necessarily the one that Liz Green is talking about. So she's in this book. It's Liz Green and Juliet Sherman Burke, the authors of the Mythic Tarot. And they suggest the Hierophant is Chiron directly there. Yeah.
And for me, I think this is a good example of how, for me, when I lay out the cards, they intuitively make sense to me and they give me information. And that personal relationship I've developed with the cards is more my truth than a system of what everything is supposed to be, even though I've learned them.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And that's that part of being able to hold different people using, there's different people can have different identifications, but somehow when it's integrated, the truth emerges for the questions you're asking. They morph, and even sometimes the same image sometimes means one thing to me for one situation or person, and then it transforms into something else, and it makes complete sense of what I'm being told through the whole pattern of the tarot or the whole pattern of the chart.
Yeah, isn't that the mastery of reading the cards to figure out in each context what's the nuance of the cards? Because it's not a fixed thing, isn't it? We can't
Yeah.
say even Chiron is not a fixed thing, neither is anything else. So these connections we make with astrology are not pinning us down to something very specific.
And the same with astrology is that how do different astrologers come up with, become effective in helping assist someone, which is the main, to me, I've always said that's the main goal is do I serve the person who's coming to me?
Yes, that's right. That's right. So yeah, we're over the second hour now, and if you guys want, we can go towards completion. But now is the moment for anyone else to say whatever you want to say. Suggest what we do next time if you wish.
Oh,
Um,
I would like to add. Sorry. Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh,
ahead,
I
Chloe.
wanted to share a little bit because when you were discussing about the Hierophant and versus temperance in the tarot, something that I noticed in the major arcana was that if you're into numerology, they both go back to into a 5 because temperance is 14 and then the Hierophant is the 5th card, so they both go back to a 5, which is really interesting to me, at least when I was studying the numerology of it, because to me 5 is a very, I guess, quote unquote unstable number. It's very movement oriented, but the cards that have the 5 associated with it are the Hierophant, which is about, a lot of people say it's about tradition and what's rooted there in place and systems, whereas temperance is about being at peace with oneself in general and having everything in balance. So I thought that was a really interesting um thing that I noted, at least when I was studying the cards, the
So Chloe, in which system is it number 5, the Hierophant? Because I know that there was some sort of difference between two, if I'm not mistaken. So there was one system where the first several cards were ordered differently than in another. You have always the Fool and then the Magician as 0 and 1.
Mhm.
Then usually there is this variance, whether it's after that the Empress, the Emperor, and then the Hierophant and the High Priestess, or is it first the High Priestess and then you see there was something there that not every deck
Oh,
agrees on. So we
oh, I think the other system. I have one of my other decks. It's called the Universal Goddess Tarot. And I don't quite recall the exact term for it, but in that deck at least the numbers that were switched were 8 and 11. So the Strength and Justice cards were switched around. Strength became the 11th card and the Justice card became 8, whereas in the Rider Waite Smith that I have, at least, it's the Justice is those are
11. Yeah, I'm just
yes.
looking at that.
But for the decks that I have, the Hierophant is 5. It's associated with 5 for the decks that I have.
Right.
I haven't encountered a deck in the ones that I've used or other decks that I've been looking at. I haven't encountered like a different arrangement
Okay,
for
fair
the
enough.
few cards except Justice and Strength.
Red,
Fair enough.
Redlina.
Yes, James.
So if they are assigning Chiron to the Hierophant, what do they do with Taurus then?
Well, this is the tricky part with astrological signs and planets directly wanting to be assigned to the tarot. I don't think it works. And that's what I say in my talk there, that I think this whole thing doesn't work because there would inevitably be discrepancies or overlapping symbols. So I think it's ultimately it's not the point. The point is to, when you consider each card, this is my opinion, when you consider each card separately, you discover for yourself based on your astrological knowledge and your system of astrology that you use, and I mean the way you think about astrology in general. Like Stephen has so much esoteric knowledge, for example, and I'm sure that if you follow that good advice that you were given, Stephen, and you started with astrology and then went to tarot, then you are able to then associate freely in the tarot whatever you see. So I don't want to be dogmatic about this card is this and the other card is the other, but especially for particularly for the Hierophant, I think it's very literal. This is one of the easiest to connect cards to me because I can't think of any other of the major arcana that better fits Chiron, or is so much fitting Chiron? If you know, tell me. I mean, what else do you think? Maybe we may discover traces of Chiron in other cards for sure.
I'll
Yeah.
think
I think if we're going to get, if you, when you start doing that, then you end up with a lot of different opinions.
Mm-hmm.
I have a general, when I do readings, and I prefer to do the tarot when I'm sitting down with somebody, but I'm always mixing tarot and astrology, though I don't do a chart for the event. I do is when if I'm going to do an astrology reading, I will look at my chart and their chart and look at the connections between our two charts.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'll also, even if I'm just doing a straight astrology reading, I'm also looking at the correlation of their planets and signs in terms of the, primarily I do it with the major arcana. But I'm doing both at the same time. And when I'm doing a straight tarot reading, I'm also thinking though of the astrological correlation.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
For me, the one problem I have with the tarot correlation really is only the image they use for the Hierophant, or not the Hierophant, but the Hermit card, which is supposed to correlate with Virgo. But the image of the Hermit rarely correlates to the sign Virgo. But that's me. But then,
because in the different decks there are different pictures. You mean the Rider White, the one with the
I don't use Rider-Waite.
what do you use?
I primarily, I use the Voyager tarot.
What was it again? Sorry, I didn't hear you.
It's the Voyager.
The Voyager. Okay, because I can see
The problem I have with the problem I have with Rider-Waite, and both my wife and I tried to learn the tarot using Rider-Waite, but because there's so many rules to learning it, and the imagery just doesn't relate. I don't relate to that Renaissance. And so, we discovered the Voyager deck, and that took care of it, because it's so much more expressive than any other tarot deck out there, from our perspective. And so it allows for a lot more freedom of so that's the deck I use, is the Voyager. Now in Voyager, the 8 card is balance, the 11 is strength, 14 is art rather than temperance. So there's a few different terms, some of the names have been changed a little bit, but the correlation basically remains the same. But now let me ask you another question, because I'm curious. Do you read reversals?
I do, but not always. Depends on what kind of reading I'm doing, whether if it's an extensive reading and it's something like the Celtic Cross or Celtic Cross, I'm not sure how it's called, but if it's not just pulling out one card, it all depends on the situation. But I do feel like the reversed meanings give another dimension, which is a lot more complete. Like every thing in astrology has a double side, at least, it's multi-faced. We can see whether the shadow, the dark side of an energy will potentially come out in the situation, or the positive potential. So yeah, I do. I like the reversed meanings, and I make them up myself. I don't necessarily go to a particular source and read what it says there, and I take it for granted. No, I try to, kind of try to feel what it is based on the one that's the usual, straight one. Yeah.
The way I read reversals is I read them like retrograde.
Okay, possibly.
Like an astrological retrograde.
Yeah, but
because all of the
not necessarily negative
cards correlate back astrologically.
Mm-hmm.
I have another question, and it's just a procedural thing. Okay, so if you're sitting down with a client, do you pull the cards, or do you let the client pull the cards?
So I let the client pull the cards. This is my way.
You let the client.
Yes, I let the client because I feel like my participation in the whole process is more to do with the explanation afterwards of what's the connection between the question and the cards they
Yeah,
pulled. I
okay.
feel like
Um,
whoever is asking the question already knows the answer, and that's why they need to pull the cards. That's my general rule.
how about the others? Do you pull the card for the client, or do you let the client have the deck and pull the card?
I mine depends. Some for the ones who are more new to my readings, at least I let them have a reign in it. So I do let them. I spread out the cards, and then they choose whichever ones they want. However, there have been times like now when I do remote readings that I shuffle until one falls out. So I would agree with Radilina that it most reading for most of the time.
I
Steven?
would,
But I do
Sorry.
tend towards like letting them pick, because it's sort of, to me, how I communicate it is, okay, I'm just gonna read it, this is your life, so you have
Yeah.
a stake in it. So
I was
Lauren?
just going to say I do it both ways also, depending on the situation. But I am very specific if of changing the cards. I have a lot of intention in my work and believe in the intention. So if I want the cards to reflect the other person and switch them from myself, I have procedures in which I transfer
Mm.
the cards to only reading for the other person and removing all the other energies and my own. And then sometimes when it's for me, I have a procedure in which I switch it back for me, or switch. It's like I clean them, but with intent and action. And so I do that in order to, because so many things these days anyway are remote. And so many of the people who want to work with me don't live in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Steven, you were going to say something?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to get back with Chloe. Chloe, as far as your references, do you have this particular book called The Kabbalistic Tarot by Robert Wang?
oh no, I don't have that. I'm gonna write it down, and I will.
Well, the book was published a few years ago. It's hard to acquire, but I will share with you that it's available as a free PDF on the download. Now, I have a link for that, and I'm looking for it now. But I'm still in the process of looking for it in my categories. But what I wanted to substantiate with you, because here you had mentioned about the Gemini Sagittarius thing, and then got a little display here where it identifies that yes, in one regard, temperance is associated with Sagittarius, but it's on the path that is, as far as the 22 paths, it's on that middle path there, from the moon to the crossbar of the tower between the Nexac of Mercury and then that Hode of Venus there. So it's on that upward ascent, which kind of correlates to what you were saying. And in terms of, everyone has a different interpretation, of course, because again, some people will put Qatar as Pluto rather than Neptune. And it's like some people feel comfortable with Pluto, the rock planet, being Qatar. And people say, well, no, Neptune is really the spiritual planet, and that should be Qatar, and Neptune be the Doth. But what I'd like to do is let me finish what I'm looking for, and I can put the link here for this particular book being free. Okay.
That's fine.
Sure, thank you.
Is that the same Robert Wang that wrote the Union Tarot book?
I believe so. I'm saying believe as a I'm not particularly sure, but it's probably been after, because I have that one as well.
Okay, well, it may be the same person. It's definitely the same name. So there is a Jungian tarot. I think, Chloe, you mentioned you are interested in Jung, and it's very, very related. Of course, yes, everything comes back to the same page. I recently did a course on Jungian astrology, which was very much relating the general archetypes of Jungian psychology to whatever we're doing. But again, it's such a big sea of information, and we can easily get lost into the many details, and very difficult to integrate them. Isn't that what Sagittarius is all about at the end of the day? This picking and choosing based on intuition, based on this fiery feeling about it, without even having this definite explanation. But many resources. If you want, you can check out the Jungian. I find it very interesting and funny. The descriptions of the cards in the Jungian one are very different and very sometimes, yeah, you can discover for yourself. It's a rather small book, but it's very directly Jungian. And how about, do you know the Khodorkovsky book, James? Maybe you do, because you know about Tower a lot.
Unfortunately, I have to go now because I have another Zoom at 11. So
No
this has
problem.
been
We'll
very-
have to say goodbye anyway, any moment.
Yeah.
now.
I have
So-
one question I wanted to ask. This is unrelated, but I think if anybody, I don't know if you can see this statue. Is this, do you know this? And is it, I'm trying to get it. Oh, there you can see it. Is this Mercury?
It looks like a Cupid to me.
It looks like Cupid, not Mercury.
Now, Mercury usually has the wings on his feet, I think.
Yeah.
And Mercury is an adult. That appears to be a child, and Mercury
Stephen,
is an
what?
adult.
Okay, so it's Cupid.
Not sure if it's Cupid, but it's not Mercury, as Stephen said, and James said its wings are on the feet.
See you
Okay,
all next time.
See you,
bye.
James. See you next
Bye-bye.
time. Bye for now.
Nice to see you, Chloe. See you again.
Nice meeting you. Thank you.
Well, so Chloe, I still can't find my link because I know that this book, this volume, I have it and my file as a free download. But I'll tell you what, can you, if you put your email down in the chat box, then when I get the link, I'll send you the book for nothing, huh?
Oh, sure. Thank you. I would love that. Let me
All right.
just type that
Yeah,
out.
so I know that Radilina wants to break away here. So if you just put your email down there, I'll
And
pick it up.
Stephen, will you put your, I've asked if, could you give, I have your email somewhere, but could you tell me your email again?
Yeah, I posted again up there in the chat. It's
I'm looking for it. I haven't seen it.
well, someone asked me, right? Gareth, point. Someone asked me, Stephen, may I have your email address? Thanks. Was that?
Stephen, you sent it directly to
But I
me
don't see it.
because
Oh, okay. All right.
I
Because
will copy it to everybody now. I just realized. So it was directly to me. So now
And I was the one that asked.
here it is. Is that
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
okay. All right.
Let
So
me
then,
write that in.
Chloe, you put your email address down there, and I'll come up with this book for you.
I
I
have
just sent it.
which just before we go, if you want to tell me what you think, do you guys want to do some sort of database, to create a database together with, I mean, I can set it up and then over time we can fill it and publish it somewhere on a shared link where everybody in the group can access it, maybe an Excel file or something like this, where we can all add resources in one place. And we can all have all this information that we regularly share with one another in this scattered way in the chat boxes and so on. We can always put it back in this same database. So we all can go back to it and check it out over time. What do you think?
That's a
Yeah.
great idea. I would enjoy that. That would be very helpful as well.
Perfect. So I may create some sort of folder for us, and each one of you will have a separate folder in that folder. And you can put in there all the things that you want to share with the group, your work, your links, your websites, your books, whatever you think you want to share. And I will also make a catalog that is basically listing what we can find in each one of those folders. So what we can find in Stephen's folder, for example, there will be a
Good
list.
idea.
Yeah, or in Dwayne's folder. So over time, this can be our secret, like shared only within the group. I will email it to people that sign up for the events. So if you have ever signed up, you can have access to it and something like that. Yeah. I'm actually going to make some more changes once I'm back to Valencia in June, and maybe the whole format of things will be a little different.
When do you return to Valencia, or what is the date you have in mind currently?
Most likely on the 1st of June, so in about 10 days, something like that. So if you want, we can try to meet like this next week again, even though I will be traveling and I'm not sure where exactly I'm going to be. So I may skip next week. I'll tell you. But definitely on the following one, there will be something, which is, I think, the 3rd, if I'm not mistaken, Thursday, the 3rd of June. So the latest then, we can see each other again. And by that time, I will be able to tell you exactly what else I'm planning.
It's not like if we're hungry for more, we can always go back. Like now I see you have done that astrology and tarot, and there's so
I
many
think you guys knew
stories
about this.
you have for us.
Good, it was brought up. It was last year that I did it, and I was very, very interested for some time to rediscover it for myself because it was.
I have folders of work I've done on relating the two, but I kind of have, I know where my notes are, but now I'm just sort of lots of times I do things and then they just stay as like resources within them. Like the I Ching, I told you I did it every day for 10 years. So then things become or the same with the tarot. I know the tarot backwards and forwards because I've done it so often. But then if I go back to my notes, I can have more of a contribution if we ever do something with that.
I think maybe we can also do a discussion on the tarot one time. It's just I feel like it's going to be very, very long. It will end up extremely long because when I did this talk on the major arcana, it was only on the 22 cards, but I could hardly do it in the 2 hours and something that I had planned for it. So
and the important thing for me is that we don't come into war because of differences.
Yes, that's why I decided to disregard most of the, well, not disregard, take into account a lot of things, but just to offer you my own take. You may disagree, but that's okay, because I think I managed to discover several interesting things that as astrologers we can use separately from the tarot. Like, for example, some asteroids are connected to some of the cards, and things like the moons of Mars. This may sound very unusual to you, but one of the cards, I think it was the Chariot. The Chariot with the 2 horses, the black horse and the white horse. I found like this is definitely a Martian symbol to me, but not directly Mars as a planet. There is something else going on there. So I have an argument in my talk that this may be related to Phoebus and how were they called? The 2 moons of Mars, fear and terror. Yeah, they're called fear and terror. So anyway, you take a look. I think this was actually not this card. It was another one, but I'm getting a bit confused. It was a long time ago. Take a look if you're interested. Yeah. And tell me what you think next time or whenever we speak again. But I will really try next week to organize the same as today. I think there is so much we can talk about. And I'm really happy that you're all taking part so actively. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Chloe. Chloe, you are a talent. Keep on.
Oh, thank you.
It's been a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure being here.
Hope you come next time too. And I'll see you again next time.
Thank you, Radilina, for
Thank
all you do.
you.
I think
Thank
of
you very much.
Dwayne's Temple of Flowers. Is that what Radilina comes from?
Absolutely.
And so, like, to me, now I see that as so true. You are like a temple of flowers.
When are you going to tell us about the temples, Dwayne?
I'm working on it. I'll let you know.
Okay.
I'm not sure I like being in the Temple of Monkeys, though.
Is that where you are?
I think he put me in the date that I ended up in the Temple of Monkeys, I think.
Oh, interesting.
The mudra for which is it looks pretty good on you, girl.
Which temple are you?
Well, I'd rather be in the Temple of Flowers with Radilina.
Come join. You're invited to my temple.
Thank you. I do show up.
We can all be guests. We can all be guests in each other's temples if they're our houses in a way. Which one are you at, Dwayne? What was yours?
Thunder.
Thunder. Oh, what am I asking?
Uranus.
Of course it will be.
Kawak.
Have you checked about Stephen by any chance?
What year were you born?
Oh, I was born in 51.
So
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, Dwayne. What do you know it by
Probably
heart?
Temple of Mirrors, I suspect, but
Years.
we'd have to check the exact date. But
Next time you're gonna tell him and us.
well, I really will. And just having this conversation, I'll be putting more time and energy into getting a presentation together that really brings everybody in.
Well, if you
It's-
want to aim for example, the 3rd or the 10th of June, that would be great if you
Okay.
want. But you don't need to. You know, you can tell me when yourself.
Okay, I appreciate that. We'll just let it be for the moment. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
everyone.
One more time.
Have a
Thank
lovely
you.
week or 2 weeks before we meet again.
All right, very
See you
good.
soon.
Cool.
Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Take
Bye.
care.